Hi, welcome back to Sober Now. I'm Jim LaPierre. Gonna do something a little bit different today. I've been seeing a lot of posts on social media about different planets going into retrograde and what that means for all of us. So I'm no astrologer, I'm not really into any of that kind of thing, but I can recognize that maybe there's something to it. From all my years of doing crisis work, whenever there was a full moon, folks just expected that the floodgates were going to open and all kinds of crazy shit was going to happen. And to be honest, it usually did. So, because I know so little about retrograde, I looked it up. And what's kind of interesting to me is retrograde creates the appearance that things are going backwards, but it's not actually. It's just how it appears to us based on how the sun and the moon and the earth rotate and how things look. So it occurred to me that there's something really similar that happens in our recovery. Quite often, folks feel like they're backsliding or just that their recovery is not going in the right direction, but they come to that decision based on how things feel. And depending upon where you're at in recovery, the simple truth is progress doesn't feel good. Not when you're going through it. In early recovery, we're starting to be more mindful, pay more attention to ourselves, which means that everything that we had been numbing becomes something that we're more aware of. The types of fears that we were avoiding are now challenges that we're facing. So the idea that maybe we're doing it wrong is an underlying assumption that most of us make. But using emotion to gauge your progress or whether or not you're moving in the right direction is probably the worst possible approach. Similarly, when it comes to decision making, emotions are usually the worst possible basis. We still have this crazy romanticized bullshit idea in our culture that following your heart is a good idea. My experience, especially in the first few years of recovery, our hearts tell pretty little lies. Our hearts are seeking a kinder, gentler, softer path instead of decisive and clear courses of action. So I want you to just consider that better ways of making decisions, obviously beliefs and values, logic and rational problem-solving approaches. Better to do things based on maybe what's worked for millions of other people, or just listen to your intuition, listen to your instincts, listen to good people. Don't seek advice. Talk to people about where you're at and get some feedback about your ideas. Asking for advice is a little too passive. So you can follow your heart after you run it past your gut and your gut decides, okay, this is the right decision, this is the right direction for me to be going in. Sometimes things are just not going to feel right. Anxiety is extraordinarily common in recovery. Sometimes just feeling down and having no idea why. Quite often we go looking for some type of cause and effect in terms of why am I feeling this way today, instead of focusing on how do I cope with this feeling, how do I reach out for more support, how do I get better. I remind folks quite often that most of us spent years and years and years avoiding, repressing emotions, stuffing things, and now even when we're doing the right things today, we find that we're feeling bad. And so sometimes that's just memories or just raw emotion that's surfacing. And again, all of that underscores the need to be reaching out more and connecting. Most often, when people tell me that they're struggling, what I find is that they're spending way too much time alone and they're not sharing what they're going through with friends or family. They're not getting enough support in their fellowship or in the circles that support them. One of the very best things I think about going to counseling or working with a coach is that you get to hear yourself talk. So things that made perfect sense inside my head, when I say them out loud, they start to sound a little bit crazy, or way more commonly, they just sound like bullshit. I would love to, there's a million things that as a coach and as a therapist, I'd love to have $1 for every time something happened. So one of the things I'd most love to have $1 for is every time somebody was just clearly struggling and identified that and They talked in circles about it, and they had a lot of feelings about it, but then they concluded it by saying, well, I guess I just got to keep doing what I'm doing. And no, no, about 100% of the time, that's a bad idea. It's not like we necessarily need to add a whole lot of activity or take on more commitments. Typically, what we most need is to have more people in our lives, and to be allowing ourselves a little more vulnerability, just to share what we're struggling with currently. We don't have to tell anybody our life story. I hear from folks all the time how their trust issues are a barrier. Okay, let's not go out and put our heart in somebody's hands. Let's just talk to them about what the next hurdle is in our recovery. And let's make sure we got some plans. If you don't have something that you're working towards, then what you're pursuing is just the idea of feeling better. We need people who challenge us. We need people who hold us accountable, and we need to know what we're working towards, because otherwise, how do we measure the progress that we're making in recovery? I mean, counting days is good. Counting years is great. And I want to encourage you to have something else there, that you know what your progress is and what the next step is, because otherwise we just fall into the pitfall of how things feel to us. So, feelings are important. They deserve to be shared and coped with, but they're a lousy basis for decision making, and they're not often a good gauge of the direction of your recovery. Uh, that's it for today, but please put a like on this video, share with friends and family, subscribe to our YouTube station, and check me out on Thursdays, noontime Eastern. I'm going to be doing some live streaming, talking about different topics in recovery. You can find that on Facebook, on Sober Now's page. You can connect with me with questions or topics that you'd like to see addressed, jim@sobernow.com. As always, please keep taking good care of you and keep investing in your recovery. Thanks.